So, guys, one of the things that was really impactful in this final stretch of the season was the pitching, because they played a lot of close games. You saw both starters and bullpen really come up nails. And really, I think one of the things that maybe we should start on is just how big now is that Justin Verlander trade in hindsight?
Yeah, the overall winning percentage post-trade was basically the same as it was before, right? With the Astros collapsing with room to uncollapse. But Verlander was pretty average until his last two starts. Right? His ERA was 3.93 his first 9 starts after rejoining the team. But he was a dependable, almost without fail, at least 6-inning guy to keep you in games, to not have your bullpen overly taxed, at every fifth turn through the rotation. So, I think it would be simplifying to say that trade enabled them to win the division, but not grossly simplifying.
Yeah, I mean, it was just down the stretch. He was so good. I'm just looking at his last 5 games here. On September 6th against the Rangers, 7 innings, only 4 hits, 1 earned run, 6 Ks. Then he had a bad performance against the Oakland A's. Surprise, surprise with the Astros, right? But then after that, Orioles game, 6 innings, 3 earned runs, 5 strikeouts. That you have a chance to win that ball game. But then the Mariners game, we all know, where he was just dominant, went all the way into the 9th inning, not quite able to get the complete game. And then the Diamondbacks, 5 innings, no earned runs. It's just down the stretch when you needed him the most, he pitched great. And then to compare that to Fromber, who, you won that Mariners game with him, but he had to come out after 4 innings and you had to use all your bullpen guys just to sneak out with a win there. And who would have thought this? With the season over, Verlander finishes with a 3.22 ERA. Fromber finishes with a 3.45 ERA. So I would have been surprised if you told me JV would end up with a better ERA over the course of the season than Fromber, but he's pitched really good down the stretch. And, for me, he's the number one. He's the guy I trust the most. I love Fromber too, don't get me wrong, but I'm just kind of hot hand lately who's been pitching better in big moments. It's been Verlander. So I wouldn't be surprised if Dusty gives him the ball game 1.
As the Astros assess this, my guess is they will go with JV, deferring to career status. And pre-World Series, Justin Verlander has been tremendous through his postseason career. Would it rankle Fromber at all? A guy you're hoping to extend conceivably beyond the 2 years remaining under team control? You can't worry about that kind of stuff. Right? You're going after the 2023 World Series now. Chance to become the first repeat champion in 2 decades. Vaulting the Astros even more up the all-time dynasties list if they get back to win a 3rd World Series in 7 years. But there is this to consider. The format of the division series, 3 out of 5, Game 1 Saturday, Game 2 Sunday, Game 3 Tuesday, Game 4 Wednesday. That does mean you need 4 different starting pitchers unless you're willing to come back with someone on 3 days rest. So I think what the Astros at least have to work through in their decision-making on this is, say they're down 2 games to 1. I think 40-year-old Verlander on 3 days rest is a non-starter. So Fromber better equipped to go on 3 days rest if he started game 1, but are you down 2 games to 1 in part because Fromber didn't deliver the mail in game 1? Or maybe it was Verlander who didn't in game 2. Or do you just say Verlander 1, Fromber 2, Christian Javier is not money in the bank, but I think he's stabilized enough over his last 3 starts that he's the clear game 3 starter. So if you're down 2-1 in game 4, are you saying Urquidy piggybacked by France and the bullpen, or do you want the option of coming back with Fromber on 3 days rest, because Verlander would then have 4 days rest for a decisive game 5? So I think you're derelict in your duty if you don't work all through all these alternatives if you're the Astros. But in the end, I think they're just going to say, we're going with our best and most experienced in game 1. And if we need to adjust on the fly, we'll do so. But Verlander 1, Valdez 2, that would put Javier on the road in game 3. And then game 4, it would be Urquidy, France Urquidy, however they opted to go. And then game 5, you would have both Fromber and Verlander on at least 4 days rest.
Do you think with Urquidy's most recent performance, do you think that kind of puts him ahead of the pecking order in JP France? Not that France hasn't had a great year. Obviously, comparatively, France has had the better year, but giving Dusty and his proclivity to, give deference towards the veterans, and Urquidy certainly has a lot of meaningful playoff experience. Do you think Urquidy kind of jumps JP France in the pecking order here?
Man, I don't know, but I think Dusty's definitely going to consider it. I hate to give you an I don't know, but it's Dusty Baker we're talking about here. And Urquidy, I mean, he was so poor that they took him out of the rotation recently, and that's with Hunter Brown staying in the rotation. And Hunter Brown has just been a disaster the last month or so. So for Dusty to view him lesser than Hunter Brown and just one performance, have him jump above JP France, I don't know. And you have to worry or think about, like, where do the pitching coaches come in on all this? Like, what are they going to recommend? Is Dusty going to listen to him? I think it's a great question, Brandon, because none of us really have any idea but Dusty.
It was just one good performance from Urquidy, but it was a hellaciously good and timely performance. I think they can wait on this. And what if, be it game one or game two, Fromber runs a serious pitch counter, isn't going well? You're still in the game. You're down 4-3 in the fourth inning. Well, maybe you're saying, I'm using Urquidy here because I need a longer man out of my pen. France a little more experience earlier this season, but I would think in a postseason spot they would have more trust in Urquidy. So it's a decision they don't have to make until they get in the series. Verlander, as strong as he was in Arizona, only went 5 innings because it took him 94 pitches. Well, for one game, that's fine, right? One reliever, and then you get to Neris, Abreu, Presley. We might want to modify the order on that in the postseason, subject to where you're at in the batting order in a given inning. But especially if 2 days in a row you don't happen to get a deep start from your starter, maybe you've used Urquidy before a prospective game 4, and that swings it to France's favor. Or you sweep in 3 and don't have to worry about any of this stuff.
Yeah, and the bullpen in that final stretch was also nails. Shout out to all those guys. And Dusty kind of showed us who his, kind of what the pecking order is for the bullpen in that fight. When he had to win a game, you saw who he went to and how long he went to them in preference over some other guys. And as goofy as we find the lineups from Dusty, I feel like the bullpen usage, especially in those final games, was very telling. And I think it was a lot more practical and logical than some of the lineup decisions that he makes throughout the season. We saw, Brian Abreu, nails, Hector Neris. I mean, man, that guy built the statue. I almost was thankful that maybe Presley wasn't available on that game Saturday night, just because Presley has seemingly had a hard time keeping the sheet clean during his recent appearances. Brian Abreu is going on, I don't know how many appearances without giving up a run, but it's substantial. What is your final assessment of how this lineup stacks up, the bullpen stacks up, and kind of how do you think they'll use some of these, the other guys like, Maton, and how will, Ryan Stanek? I mean, we saw Ryan Stanek couldn't even buy an appearance in the last postseason. How do you think those extra guys in the bullpen fit in?
And would Dusty consider changing his closer in the postseason? I would lean to not. Presley has been shaky in recent weeks now, not just that outing Friday night. Abreu has been awesome. The robot managing thing, that save situation, 9th inning, must use closer then and only then. You use your best reliever when the most critical outs of the game are in play. Now, that Presley's not their best reliever, I think actually helps in this decision-making, because say you're up 3-2 in the 7th inning, and you're playing Toronto, and they have a couple of runners on, and here come Springer, Bichette, Guerrero. That might be the true save situation in the game. I want Abreu in there. Well, no way is Dusty going to go to Presley ahead of Abreu in those spots. So where you fall in the lineup, if you're facing the bottom of it's a 3-2 Astros lead going to the 8th inning. The bottom of the order is coming up, 6, 7, 8. I would rather use Presley there right now, get through that, and then I have my best pitcher as their best hitters are coming up when they turn over the lineup. in the ninth inning. That would be a pretty big stray from how the Astros have played it. So I presume they'll stick with what they've been going with. Neris is obviously the number 3 guy. And then I presume they go to the analytics and play the matchups game, whether it's Maton or Graveman. Look, it was with a big lead, but Montero's burped a couple of times again recently. Is he an absolute lock to make the playoff roster? Right? You're certainly not going to carry 14 pitchers. That would be stupid. In a 5-game series with 2 off days, you really don't need 13 pitchers. Right? You have a garbage man type that you can throw in. So that's the kind of roster making decisions they'll have until Saturday morning to work through.
I think it'll be interesting because I remember back when Graveman was on the team the first time a couple of years ago and they went to the postseason. Some of the times he would put Presley in the 8th inning and then Graveman the 9th, and Dusty would say, I did that because the heart of the order was in the 8th inning, so I wanted Presley to face those guys. And then Graveman pitched the 9th, and we know he had closing experience before he came over to the Astros. This year's a different story, but I do find it interesting. Dusty said this a few times. When Montero has come in some of these games around the 5th or 6th inning and kind of pitched really poorly and let the game get a little out of hand, give up 3-4 innings, Dusty several times has said that, hey, what am I not going to use the guy? I want to put him in now in the 5th or 6th so that if he does cough up the lead, we have several more innings to catch up and get back in the game. Whereas I'm kind of with Charlie. If the game's hanging in the balance in the 6th inning, I'd like to see Neris come in. He's kind of their cleaner for me. A couple guys on base and you're worried you might lose the lead. Get Neris in there to clean up that inning and get you out of there with the lead, where Dusty sees it differently. He'd rather cough up a couple runs there and then have enough time to come back and recapture the lead again. So I think that's something that's going to be really important. It'll be interesting to see if Dusty still plays it that way in the postseason as opposed to the regular season. And to Charlie's point, is Montero even going to be an option for him?
And just one other roster decision I expect they will not even contemplate. But again, it's a 5-game series with 2 off days. You don't need 13 pitchers. I would rather have a 3rd catcher, which would be Cesar Salazar. So if, I'm down 5-2 in the 4th inning, but I have a couple of guys on and 2 out, I could be very aggressive hitting for Maldonado. Let's say Dubon is in center field, McCormick is in left. That means you have both Brantley and Diaz on the bench. Well, if you're facing a right-handed pitcher, Diaz hit better against righties, but you prefer the sage veteran Brantley and want to use him early. Well, then you could put Salazar in the game and you still have Diaz on the bench to hit for Salazar the next time around. Or if there is another spot we wanted to hit for Dubon because you're looking for a long ball. Are they going to wedge John Singleton onto this playoff roster just for that snowball's chance that he runs into a mistake and hit a fly ball in a spot that way in Seattle? So, these are decisions at the end of the roster because you're back to 26 after being 28 on the roster in September that you wouldn't think should tip a series. But if there's one moment where that one extra player, the way they had Miles Straw available for just pinch running usage a couple of years, basically, what calls will they make on those spots? Multi-position flexibility. God forbid someone gets injured, right? Greg Kessinger offers you more in that area, and he's certainly more of a speed guy than John Singleton, who's a one-trick pony. You're hoping he runs into a mistake and can hit a home run. So they have until the weekend, and we'll see what they choose to do.
I just wanted to make one more point with that, Charlie. I think it's interesting if we look back to the World Series last year. Remember, Christian Vasquez didn't get a start at DH until that final game. And remember what had changed then? Well, what had changed is Yuli got hurt, and they elevated another backup catcher to the roster. So they had some insurance in case there was an injury. They had a 3rd catcher on the roster. And then that's when you saw them go to Christian Vasquez in the DH spot in the final game. So you wonder, will Dusty have the same mentality to where, well, I can't use up Yainer Diaz in case an injury were to happen if he doesn't have a 3rd catcher available to him?
But you hit the head on the nail there, Josh. That was because of an injury that they changed that lineup. Yep. You had got nothing out of the DH position up to that point. So Dusty's back had to be put all the way against the wall for him to make that decision. So I don't know that his mindset changes there until, like you said, maybe there's an injury that forces him to rethink it, which we hopefully, we hope is not the case there. But I think when you're talking about that dusty mindset about Montero and kind of putting him in early enough for giving them time to catch up, I would hope that's a regular season mentality, because looking at that final stretch of the season, when the season was hanging in the balance, Montero sat in the bullpen through that final stretch.